Marijuana guy.
Alright, so before I get into the video, I understand that most of the techniques I'll be discussing are considered low percentage moves. What that means is that the move is not as successfully executed relative to the amount of times it is attempted. For example, an armbar is considered a high percentage move because it's very successful relative to the amount of times it's attempted. It's one of the reasons why it's such an emphasized submission in most people's ground games. That being said, just because a move is considered low percentage doesn't mean that it's inherently ineffective, because you also have to consider individual skill. For example, leg locks are inarguably an incredibly low percentage move in MMA. However, guys like Masakatsu Imanari, Ryan Hall and Husumar Palhares are still able to pull them off and make leg locks look extremely effective because they've spent countless hours mastering the technique. The point I'm trying to make is that just because a move is underutilized or underrated doesn't necessarily mean it's bad. Anything can be effective with enough practice, and with that said, let's start with the side kick. Also known as yopchege in Taekwondo or yokogeri in Karate, the side kick is a highly versatile weapon that's comparable to the teep or push kick in kickboxing and Muay Thai. It can be used defensively to disrupt an opponent's attack or create distance, and offensively to close distance or deal serious damage. Its effectiveness really comes from its mechanics. The kick is traditionally chambered, meaning it's essentially loaded, like a bullet ready to go through you. This, along with the pendulum step that is commonly used, contributes to its power. The chamber does leave you open for counterattacks, but it also opens up a host of offensive tools. For example, when a side kick is chambered, the opponent cannot know whether the strike is coming to the leg, body, or head, and a fighter can use this to their advantage. Furthermore, the side kick can be crossed into or out to many other attacks. For example, a common combination is to feint or throw a round kick, but instead of following all the way through with it, you stop in a bladed stance and throw a side kick instead. Another great way of using the side kick is to use that chamber to cross into other attacks, like the hook kick. Now, the biggest problem of the side kick is that it requires a more bladed sideways stance to be properly executed, which can be hard to do from a more squared stance. But there are still many ways to set this kick up by changing stances mid-combination, as shown here by Wonderbet Thompson. Next is the Uchi-Mata, or inner thigh reaping throw. It is performed usually with an overhook or headlock. It is done by loading your opponent's hips onto your own and sweeping them off their feet using your leg. Now, on its own, this technique is underrated for a reason, as it requires a great understanding of clinch work to be properly executed. However, the reason it finds itself on this list is because it's the absolute best counter to a very common takedown, namely the outside leg reap. This is an extremely common takedown in MMA and is used either from the clinch against the cage or is chained into a single leg or double leg as a means to finish a takedown. The outside leg reap feeds directly into the Uchi-Mata as the opponent loads their own hips onto yours and opens their inner thigh for the reap that's required to execute the throw. Now, as stated, this throw requires a lot of practice and work to truly learn, but nevertheless, it's still a very effective takedown that deserves a place in everyone's arsenal. Foot sweeps are essentially the jabs of the grappling realm. They're generally low risk relative to the rewards, and they can be damn rewarding if done well. The reward of foot sweeps really lies in mastering the ability to manipulate an opponent's balance. These are not techniques that you can really force with strength. If your opponent's balance isn't truly broken, they will not budge. This is important because there are many situations in and out of the clinch where the opponent will naturally load their weight far too much to one side, creating a perfect opening for a sweep. For example here, Cub Swanson is leaning into Doo-Ho Choi to resist his forward movement. Doo-Ho senses this and simply steps to the side whilst he blocks Swanson's foot, causing him to trip. Another great example is seen here. Kyamrian Abbasov is heavily pressuring Luis Santos in the clinch. Sensing this, Santos times Abbasov's knee and performs a foot sweep when Abbasov has all his weight on one leg.
I'm in danger!
Here's an example of a foot sweep being done outside of the clinch. BJ Penn is advancing here, meaning he's gonna put the majority of his weight onto his front foot at some point. Machida times this and takes his lead leg out from under him, with nothing but a pushing and blocking motion. Here's another one, courtesy of Johnny Hendricks. He marches GSP down, pulling his head and tripping his lead leg from under him. If it isn't apparent by now, foot sweeps are incredibly versatile and can be done from the inside and outside. Now, I already mentioned that balance is key for foot sweeps, but it's important to note that your own balance is equally important. A sweep could quickly end with you getting taken down if you overcommit or end up off-balanced in some way. Last but not least, the stutter step. Out of all the techniques in this video, the stutter step has to be the most underutilized, which is kind of funny because it seems to be very popular in esports and basketball. But outside of very high-level fighters like Israel Adesanya or Jerome Holloway, you rarely see it being used. As the name describes, the stutter step is a feint done by adding an extra short step before an attack, the purpose of which is to draw out a reaction from the opponent in order to make them vulnerable. In boxing, it's done with a short stutter of the lead foot when advancing or setting up an attack. In Muay Thai and kickboxing, it can be done by adding an extra step before a kick to draw out a check or parry from the opponent. It's important in fights, especially between very high-level fighters, to not set a fixed pattern that the opponent can read and exploit. The stutter step allows you to break the rhythm and fuck with your opponent's brain, and the best part is that there is no downside. City Kickboxing has already demonstrated just how powerful feints can be, so why not add this to your arsenal? So that was it for the video, guys. If you haven't already, I hope you give these moves a try on the mats.
And make sure you're dabbing on them haters.
And I will see you all next time.
Get the bread, get the head, the leaf, the leaf, the leaf. Get the bread, get the head, the leaf, peace out.